That little video you just saw is the perfect intro to what I want to talk about, which is whether dignity can become the object of a movement. To claim such a future, we have to own up to our past, and the past of our species is a predatory past. Chances are that among your ancestors, there were some great predators, or you wouldn't be here. Or maybe you were just really good at avoiding predation. But we all go back hundreds of thousands of years, and predation has been the name of the game for most of that time. We see what predation really is picking on the weak so that your chances of being harmed as you scoop up something you need is minimized. And it's been a strategy that many animals follow, lions and so on, and human beings. And it makes a certain amount of sense because the tribe over the hill has exactly what you need. They've got food and shelter, they've got child bearers, they've got stuff that you could use to enhance your survival chances. So it almost feels like we're stuck in this predatory game and there's no way out of it. I think there is a way out of it, something that can transcend it, and something we're getting close to. You've been watching TV in the last few weeks. You've seen Dignity on the March all over the world, very visibly in North Africa and the Middle East. But where it isn't on the march yet, it's waiting to be in the Far East, in South Asia and East Asia. There's a pent-up demand for dignity. I've just come back from a conference on dignity for all in Bangladesh, where the president actually came to the conference and sat there and listened to talks about dignity. And this is a better strategy than resisting it. And it was good of him to come and show the flag and give the presidential blessing to the idea of dignity for all in a society that is haunted by terrible corruption and residual casteism. Dignity is on the march, but what exactly is dignity? We need to know what it is, and for most of us, it's defined by its absence. What you sense immediately is any derision or indignity, humiliation, condescension, patronizing, these kind of things we immediately clue into because they're threats in a way. They're threats that someone sees us as a target and might be inclined to prey on us if he thought he could get away with it. For me, I got my first personal up-close glimpse of indignity in second grade, which is, I bet, where a lot of you first saw it or experienced it too. There was this tiny little girl in my second grade class who wore the same dress to school every day. And our days began with a fingernail inspection. The teacher had us hold out our hands, and one day Arlene flunked that exam and was sent to the hall for the whole day. And I watched this and wondered, how can she clean her fingernails out there? No soap, no water. We went out to recess twice during that day that Arlene stood in the hall, and there she was, slumped against the wall, trying to look small, a nobody. I didn't think good or ill of the teacher at that time, but I did take away that question. How could she clean her fingernails out there? And actually, that led to my first career in education, because I came to feel as I grew older and experienced certain humiliations myself, how counterproductive these were to learning, how I put so much energy in graduate school into fending off indignities that I had less energy left to learn physics. And that's what school is for so many. It's really armoring yourself against being teased or humiliated. Emily Dickinson has a lovely little poem that captures this better than anything I know. I'll try to recite it for you. I'm a nobody. Who are you? Are you nobody too? Then there's two of us, don't tell. They'd banish us, you know. That poem picks up on the fact that if you feel like a nobody, you start looking for allies. You look for one other nobody, so there'll be two, as in the video. Because then you're not a freak. Then you have a pal. I got a picture of dignity in contrast to indignity in India a few weeks ago. Our car stopped at a red light, and a little boy handed in a bag of popcorn. The host handed him a 10-rupee note through the open window, and before she could take the popcorn, the car sped off. 2 blocks later, we stopped for another light, and the little boy comes running up with his bag of popcorn and insists that the person who paid him take it. In that gesture, he was refusing a handout and claiming his dignity. Dignity means that there's a place for me, and that you see my place, and you accept my place, and I accept your place. Everyone contributes, and we acknowledge each other's contributions. Some contributions are less glamorous than others. Some are just making a little bag of popcorn. But the dignity accorded that person can be equal to the dignity accorded a king. The dignity movement that I imagine could be thought of as nobody's liberation. It came to me in a dream, actually. I woke up in the middle of the night about 15 years ago with a phrase sounding in my head, and it was this one. It was, "Nobodies of the world unite. We have nothing to lose but our shame." Some of you will recognize that syntax. And I thought, well, maybe nobodies could unite, not in the same way that African Americans united, or women united, or people with disabilities united, but maybe they could unite if they only knew what they were against. You can't build a movement without knowing two things. You need to know what you're for, and the dignity movement is for dignity, and you need to know what you're against to be really effective. That's where that's where the movement gains teeth. When women figured out that what they were against was sexism, their movement had teeth. 3 years later, they had a whole pile of legislation that had been blocked for decades, approved and passed by the US Congress. What is the dignity movement against? The dignity movement is against treating people like Arlene, my classmate, was treated. The dignity movement is against humiliation. It is against talking down to people. It is against games of one-upmanship, which is what my graduate training really consisted of, and why I felt like a nobody at times during it. The dignity movement is against what I call rankism. And what is rankism? Rankism is what somebodies feel they can get away with and do to nobodies. It's what people who take themselves for somebodies feel they can do to people whom they take for nobodies. Now, actually, nobody is a nobody. But we don't live that truth yet. When I was growing up, it was okay to treat any black person as a nobody, any gay person. Girls were treated as nobodies in a certain sense, and as queens in another sense. But there was a distinct sense in which they were treated like nobodies. There were none in math and physics, my field, for example. They were discouraged from entering those fields. So rankism is a degrading assertion of power or rank. And actually, we do it all the time. We also are victims of it all the time. It's still a legitimate thing in our society and around the world. But it has been called into question by the dignity movement. Why should it be not okay, exceedingly uncool, to denigrate a black if you're white, but quite okay to denigrate another white? Blacks after my talks often come up and say, you know, my big problem nowadays is not other whites. They're on eggshells around me. They're careful not to indignify me. It's other blacks that are my problem. They feel I'm open season, that they can target me and badmouth me and trash me and humiliate me. Women say the same thing. They say their problem isn't so much men now. It used to be, but it isn't so much that anymore because men are on good behavior. For fear of the charge of sexism. But other women are immune to that charge. Rankism enters there, you see. It's what, say, a woman could do to another woman, and it would be belittling or humiliating behavior. But the victim can't say it's sexism, except in a more complex way she can, but it's easier to just say it's rankism, which is what it is. Rankism, here's some examples. A boss yelling at a secretary. He may need to correct her, that's not rankism, but he doesn't need to embarrass her in the process. A priest abusing a parishioner, that's rankism. Typically, rankism takes the form in other countries of corruption or residual casteism in South Asia. And that's why they're so interested in tackling it, because they realize it's crippling their societies. And it's causing indignation throughout their societies, and every now and then indignation flares into indignity, as we see in Egypt, Tunisia, Bahrain, and as we're sure to see in other countries as nobodies liberate themselves. Now, you're probably wondering about now if rankism isn't human nature, if this predatory aspect of our past isn't indelibly engraved in our DNA, and there's nothing we can do about it. Well, I want to caution you by reminding you that that's exactly what men said about the women's movement. They resisted sexism and even resisted using the word because they said the way we're interacting with women is human nature. It can't be changed. 40 years later, we know it can be changed. There's a completely different relationship now between males and females than there was 40, 50 years ago. I lived through it and had to make adjustments. Anyone my age had to make adjustments. Anyone my age had to overcome racism. We were raised in it. It was woven into the social fabric of this country. You don't turn it off overnight. I think it takes about 6 generations to overcome an ism, and I'm going to use my family to illustrate. My great-grandparents thought that racial slurs and epithets really weren't a problem because they were the truth. My grandparents didn't parade their racism, but they did use the N-word. My parents stopped using the N-word, so my brothers and I didn't have to unlearn that. But they had racism in their hearts. In my case, and my brother's case, we supported the civil rights movement, but I remember being perplexed in 1960 when the slogan, "Black is beautiful," was being sounded all over the place. We hadn't been raised to see that. My children, all 4 of them, dated interracially. My grandchildren are of mixed race. That's 6 generations, and it's put a big dent in fuller racism. It's not gone. You don't get rid of an ism overnight. You don't get rid of it in 6 generations, but you can shift it from being cool to being completely uncool. You want to be racist today, you forfeit your chances of advancement if you don't lose your job. That's the shift we've made. We have put racism and sexism on the defensive. My generation did that. Your generation, now I'm speaking to the younger people here, has a bigger problem. We've shown it's possible to put an ism on the defensive. We haven't eradicated it, but it's on the ropes. I think it's a goner by mid-century. Rankism is a tougher nut because most of us like to keep open the option of preying on other people when we think we can get away with it. Predations take all sorts of subtle forms, as well as slavery, wage slavery. Just excluding people makes it easy for you to win. And the only reason I made the basketball team was because there were no African Americans in my high school. The only reason I got into good grad schools was the competition was restricted to men in math and physics. There were no women in the field. Keeping people out, denying them a chance, really is a subtler form of predation. And rankism is the residue of predation that we need to identify and deal with. Rankism and predation are extremely dangerous. Humiliation is actually more dangerous than plutonium. And there are a couple things, a couple reasons why I'm hopeful about this, about really putting rankism on the ropes. One is that the weak aren't as weak as they always have been. They're strong in 2 important new ways. One, weapons of mass destruction are a threat that they can deploy. 2, dignity actually works. It works better than a workplace where people are chronically humiliated, where people feel they don't have the respect of their coworkers and their boss. Dignity makes more money. It makes more money for a business. It makes for better learning in a school. It makes for better cures in a healthcare organization. So I see a dignitarian era aborning. And we are going to know it's imminent when rankism is uncool, when what you see on television every night, which is the staple of which is humiliation, when that's as embarrassing as it would be if you imagine all those people being humiliated being, say, black or gay. If they were all that, we wouldn't put up with it. But they're just citizens like us, and by watching it, we can help ourselves deal with the fact that we were degraded at work today. When television no longer dares to show this kind of thing, because it's so in such bad taste, we'll know we're on the verge of a dignitarian era. In a dignitarian era, the rule of thumb is protect others' dignity as you would have them protect yours. Defend others' dignity as you wish they would help you defend yours. The only thing as important as how we treat the earth is how we treat each other. Thank you.